So let's say we want to add some details to this one, like scratches and stuff. So I would have to look at where I'd want that put, right? So I have a choice. Either A, I could take this and I could edit it in Photoshop. B, I could take the model and send it to Mudbox and then do my tweaks inside of there. Or C, I could actually take it into Substance and do it inside of there.
Can you add another layer, a glass layer on top of that to make it reflective?
That's something you would do in the material.
Oh.
So you can make a mask that says here's where it's shiny and here's where it isn't. But all those little tweaks are in the material, not, and they can be guided by the texture. But it would be a separate map. It'd be a map that plugs into the reflectivity or the specular color or the reflected color, depending on what you're trying to do. So if I knew, let's say, on this model, let's go back to it. Zero in, press F. So I'm looking at it, and when I look at this, I say, oh, this face here is this face. This edge is the bottom. So this is that side right here. Does that make sense? So that's how I designate it. It's like, oh, that face is this face. So when I go into Photoshop, what that basically means is that this is where I'd have to make my little changes. If I were just going to hand paint them and I wasn't, like, let's say it's like a video game, mobile game, and I'm not going to do a bump map or whatever. Or I could do it either way. Either A, I could go in here and then modify this as a chip, right? So actually, let's say I took this. I'll just do it this way. Going to use the lasso. And this is the corner. So watch what I do to this. I'm going to draw a little piece right here. Yes. Wait until after the lecture. That's okay. So I've got this. I'm going to copy, paste. So it's on its layer all by itself. And then I can do a Control L. Lighten that area up. So this is where, like, maybe the top part of it is chipped off or whatever. And I still have a little bit of grain, but I have it chipped. If I were just going to not have a bump map and just literally paint it in, I would paint it in Photoshop right now. If it's going to be a bump map, I don't want that highlight in there. So in other words, if I were going to do it in Photoshop, I'm not making a bump map, I just wanted to see it that way. I would do a bevel emboss. I would bevel it down. I would tighten up like that. You see that? So I've got that little chipped edge, and it's the darker part is raised. And this is a good idea, like if I'm not going to be using a bump map, I just want to like literally embed that detail into the texture. If I were going to use a bump map, this is what I would do. I would make whatever my bump map is supposed to be. So a lot of times, let me hide that, hide this, do a select all, edit, oops, I have to be on a visible layer. Edit, copy merged, paste, and just desaturate this. so I can see what's bumping up and what's bumping down.
So you did a monochrome thing? Desaturation.
Yeah, just desaturation. So,
That gives you the highs and lows.
yeah, and what you have to remember is what? 50% gray is flat, black is pushed in, white is pushed out. So we have a few problems with this, don't we? That this black should not be receded, pushed in, the little fabric part. It should actually be much, 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 much lighter, and then have maybe, you know, I might even want to do something like this on the bump version, and just literally turn you off.
How do you choose exactly the right gray? Do you just do 50% gray in the color?
Yeah, you can do a 50% gray like within here. Just like you can actually type in some values depending on what you're doing. So 50% gray is like, you know, you could see it right here. But if I do this, you can see now I have this bumped out and then a little speckles pushed in, and I can even adjust the levels a little bit to kind of make it a little noisier like that, right? Which also means that you remember that little guy I created, which was this? Then if that's supposed to be chipped in, what should this be? Darker. So then I could just go in to my levels and push that in like so. So now here is going to be my bump map. This has grain. Now, if I didn't want this to have as much of a texture, like maybe, you know, like some wood you can actually see it's bumpy. Others, it's just smooth, and you see the wood, it's been sanded, it's flat, it's lacquered. Then if that were the case, because right now this would show all that detail in the bump, what would I do if I wanted that just flat? Flat gray. Does that make sense? So this is where that stuff, let me copy paste. So now I can go to this one. I can use my marquee tool. And then this is simply going, I adjust the levels. And I can actually just do my little tweaking. I could even just blur it a little bit. Give it a Gaussian blur. Maybe it has just a little bit. I'm giving it just a little bit of texture, but not a lot. You see that? And then I have this part chipped in. And then I decide, is this what I'd want, where this is kind of bumped out with these little speckles, or how do I want that to look, right? Maybe I make this part 50%, maybe a little bit of a darker gray, but with black and white noise on top of it, pushing little pixels in and out. Does that make sense of just that general idea? So now if I had all this the way I want it, now I could go File, Save As, and this one will save as a Targa. But, and it goes in the source images folder. But this one we'll call speaker bump. Boom. And now I'd go back into Maya. And I'd go back into that material. And I'd scroll down to where bump mapping is. And this is where I'd plug that guy in. File, and in the bump value, that's where the bump goes. Speaker bump. Boop. Bring that in. And I'd also want to update my texture, because remember I made that little spot that wasn't there before. So I'm going to hide these layers. There it is right there. See that? And now I'll resave this over that color version. Save as. You always want to keep multiple layers in your Photoshop file so you can always go back and tweak things out. Don't get rid of those. I see people like, oh, I'm done, let me delete it. It's like, new. Because you never know, and you don't want to have to remake it all over again. Oh, jinkies, you're just being difficult today. Save as. Targa. Source images. I'll just call it color 2, and I'll just, because it's being difficult. Save. And now I'll just point that texture to the second file. I could just type it in if I know what the name is, like, so instead it'd be like color 2. And there we have it down there, see? Now what you'll notice is that, wow, that's like really, really, you know, oh, haha, I forgot to turn on the speaker part again. So that part is working right, but the speaker went brown, the little front. And this is why, like, when you go in, you have to make sure, boop, file, save as, do it again. Make sure everything is turned on. Oh, you're killing me. Take a break. I'm going to have to restart my computer. There's a lot of weirdness. Never fails.
Man, with that expensive computer, it should start whenever you want it to.
Oh, it's not the computer. It's just like I have a lot of software open and it's going, huh? It happens. So, alright, so now we go back in. There we go. And you see that bump. Do you see that? So it has a nice little chip on it. If I want, I can go in and I can actually tweak out I could tweak out how strong the bump is through the bump node, but that's through bump depth. So I could tone it down. Do you see this? Or I could crank it up. You see? But that's essentially the process of making that bump map. Is I have to go through and make a grayscale version. And then I have to decide, based off of the value, what's bumped up, what's 50%, what's bumped down.
So you always use Targa for your files?
I typically use Targas because they're lossless. They hold an alpha channel. They aren't read by browsers, but they're really, really good for textures. You know, Targas and TIFFs. Some programs don't like one or the other.